Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take on this Thursday morning. And I'll tell you what, an interesting day yesterday, a little bit more volatile. As we were watching the markets early on, we're looking pretty strong. Then they immediately pulled back, both the NASDAQ and the Dow, but the Dow specifically, after being up about 80 points in the pre-market and somewhere close to that early on, suddenly had this pretty sharp sell-off, down about 250 points. It absolutely just started moving. And then throughout the rest of the session, finally finished about flat. And then you look over at the NASDAQ, a little bit stronger for sure, because the NASDAQ started off strong, it eased back a little bit, and then just completely accelerated, finished the day up about 100 points or so. So a pretty nice performance yesterday. Obviously, you've got technology, semiconductors, and some of that are kicking in, the biotechs as well, all helping out. But I'll tell you what, definitely seeing a bit of a divergence yesterday. There's no doubt about that. Crude continues to hold right around 80. And then you look over at the 10-year at about 155, somewhere close to that. It really hasn't been moving a whole lot. It's been a lot less volatile than it was. Speaking of volatility, 18 to 20 was the range. We finished the day around 18 and a half. Made some sense that we would be somewhere closer to the lower end as both indices started moving to the upside, along with the S&P 500, of course. Volumes yesterday, 35 million, a little bit of an improvement from the day before. There's about a little over 32 million. So 35 million, a pretty nice day, but still a little bit off of what has been the pace year to date. We'll see if we get a little bit more volume today as we get a little closer towards expiration. Sometimes we'll see that, especially now that we're getting in the midst of the earnings season. Financials, weakest sector yesterday. And a lot of that having to do, obviously, JP Morgan, as much as they may have crushed the numbers, there's a lot of different reasons why after that we started to see a bit of a sell-off. And that's been somewhat of the trend. That, as a matter of fact, flowed into a little bit of what we were seeing today, at least early on, and some of the back and forth that we are seeing in the financials. But definitely getting a nice start to the kickoff for the financials. So what are some of the names that really stood out yesterday? AMD is one of them. Absolutely. It was up nearly 4%. Xilinx, I mentioned the semiconductors. We also had that monstrous option paper yesterday in AMD. Oh, and by the way, they're following up with even more option paper today in AMD. So very, very active in that particular category. Freeport Mac, we talk about materials all the time. That's been that name that just sort of signifies everything about the material space. Had a really nice day. It was up about 3.5% as well. And if you take a look, you can see Freeport's been steadily just kind of gaining a little bit each and every day. Delta Airlines, that one not so great. Obviously, you look at that report and a lot of improvements, but the idea of where energy is, and I talked about energy still holding above 80. Well, that's oil. That certainly is something that was brought up by Delta themselves as a potential impact to what they're able to do and those pricing that's going to make it a little bit more difficult. You also saw some effects affecting American Airlines. Then you look over at the cruise ships not trading all that well yesterday either. The Chinese names, on the other hand, had a pretty decent day. PDD, Baidu, JD, those names actually pretty strong. Those high multiple names yesterday were also strong. You look at CrowdStrike and Okta and Zoom, all those names having a pretty decent day yesterday. So we get into today, we get deeper into earnings, a lot deeper into specifically the financials, and out of the gate, they all looked pretty good. You look at Morgan Stanley, it got up and over 100. You look over at Citi, up over 71. You look at Bank of America, had a pretty nice start to the day. Then we see a little bit of a sell-off. We've seen this happen before. We'll see how that plays out. It's been back and forth a little bit with these financials, but they did, when you look across the board, for the most part, we were seeing just numbers that were absolutely extraordinary once again and very, very powerful. And that's why we, at least initially, had a nice move to the upside. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of a recoil and starting to get back up there again. We'll see how things trade. It's going to be a long day. It's only an hour deep into the day. You look at crude, back over 81. So we know that 82 is the recent high just a few days ago, but we're back over 81 for crude. The volatility index, how about this? We talked about volatility yesterday, just kind of starting to ease back. I was a little surprised that it traded as high as it was in terms of where it closed, 18 and a half today. A lot closer to 17 and a half. So we can see that volatility, just that pressure coming down, 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 down. And how brief these moves over 20 are before we start to see those pullbacks in volatility, something to always keep in the back of your mind. 10-year, about a 153. So that's not too far away from where we've been. Obviously, we've seen some effects of where the 10-year is and some of that movement, especially when it was having those very much those big velocity moves to the upside. We obviously were watching financials and how they were progressing through that. So technology early on up about 1%. Last I looked, it was up even further. It was like up more than 1.5%. Materials up about 1%. They were at 1.8% on the move. So what's really driving the markets and why are we up 400 points today? Well, materials certainly stand out. Technology stands out. Healthcare stands out since the start of the session, up more than 1.5% early on. Semiconductors, which I know is a subsector, but up over 2% today as well. So we are seeing a lot of movement and a lot of moves to the upside. Energy kind of hanging in there still. It was up a little more, and it's a little still up, but up about 0.75%. It was up over 1% early on. So some of the leaders, I'll tell you what, healthcare really stood out because healthcare from the get-go has been very strong. You look over at United Health, that was up more than 6% today, pretty strong. Anthem, Humana, all those names, 3.5% or higher to the upside. Marvell sticks out for me. AMD sticks out. NVIDIA sticks out. All of those names of semiconductor space having a pretty decent day. I'll tell you what, KLAC 10 Core is another one of those names. Lam Research, ADI, across the board, we're seeing a nice move in the semiconductors as well. Every single sector early on was in the So, unusual option activity. First of all, sorry about that. Unusual a little bit with the video, but here we are. We're back. Unusual option activity. I will be having separate unusual option activity later on. I'll be on the halftime report. So I look forward to seeing you around noon today with Scott and the gang. So, FUBO. Now, FUBO TV, FUBO. This one's pretty interesting because of the fact this is short term, guys. I talk about it all the time, but this is extremely short term. So what are they doing? They're buying 4,500 of the October 29 calls in FUBO. Stocks trading just below 29. So when do these expire? These are October's. That means they expire tomorrow. So just keep that in mind. Very, very short term, 13 cents up to about 50 cents. Why do I give you those numbers? Because those were the numbers that were bought at the time stock starts to move to the upside. They started buying at 13 cents, finished buying a little over 50 cents for these options. Secondly, I've got Facebook. Now, with the stock trading right around 327.80, we had a buyer of 7,000 of next week. So you get a little bit more time. The October 22nd calls. And those are the 335 strike calls. They expire next Friday. They were going for a call at somewhere right around $3 for these calls. So with all of everything that we've been talking about for a while now with Facebook and all of the headaches that Facebook's having to deal with and the pressure and the move to the downside, now we're seeing a little bit of a bid again. We've seen this in the past couple of weeks, but again, we're seeing a fairly decent sized call buyer now just going out a week or so. So just to keep that in mind, it isn't very short term, the ultimate short term of tomorrow, but it does give you almost a little over a week for sure for this to pan out. And these are the 335s with the stock trading again, right around 327.80. Folks, I tell you what, knowledge is king. Understand the derivatives markets. I talk about those volumes each and every day. Derivatives are the place for leverage, and they give you an opportunity to actually reduce risk, but you've got to understand a whole lot more about it. Get educated on that. Read books. We've got great guys here on the educational side as well. So if you're ever looking, Market Rebellion is another great place as well, another resource for you to use. Folks, have a great day of trading. I'll see you at noon.